Ladies and gentlemen, we are blessed as Rotarians to have Congressman Neal Dunn with us today. And I want to thank Colonel D.W. Smith for making it happen. And Dr. Dunn, you have a long bio, so I won't get into all of that. And again, thank you for your time, and I turn it over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I trust my audio as well.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So why don't we just start with a very brief history of the coronavirus. Maybe you can mute all the other microphones just for a minute, and then I'll take questions at the end of that, if that's all right. So what I started to say is that the virus originated in China. Whatever other conspiracy theories you may have heard, it is a wild sport mutation. It occurred naturally in the wild, as in fact almost all of our viral epidemics have in the last 100 years. It did involve a bat, did involve a pangolin, which is a spiny anteater, and how somebody ate an undercooked version of one or both of those. It's a nutty thing. People have made a lot of references to the BSL-4 lab that's located in Wuhan. That's true. There's a biological warfare lab there, but it does not make sense to use an RNA virus as a weapon. It mutates too quickly. You can't control it. There's also a BSL-3 lab in Wuhan, China, just a few kilometers away from the wet meat market. And the BSL-3 lab is the home of where they study flu. We don't, actually I said 3, it's a 2 lab. It should be a 3 to study flu. In this country, we insist on a 3. But their country, they use a 2, level 2 lab. And I don't think it had anything to do with it. I can't tell you that for sure because we haven't sequenced the earliest ones. But even if it did, it was a knucklehead move. Somebody went home and didn't wash his hands or something. Most likely it did involve the meat market. It also started much earlier than we are told. The Chinese did a huge cover-up on this thing, certainly in December as well as January, probably November as well. So this virus got a huge head start before anybody admitted that it was a problem in China. The World Health Organization, I have mixed opinions on them. They basically are a wholly owned Chinese entity. Although their headquarters is on 23rd Street in Washington, D.C. They gave great cover to the Chinese and allowed them to travel and export right through the end of January. So that was a problem with the epidemic getting around the world. We now know that a huge number of people who are infected are actually asymptomatic. They have no symptoms whatsoever. Iceland tested around 15% of their population and came up with 50% positives of the positives had no symptoms whatsoever. I myself have tested positive, and my symptoms lasted for about 18 hours, and I didn't get the answer back for my test for over 2 days. And so I thought I was well and was rather surprised to find that I had a positive test and then started the medications on the advice of my physician. We can talk. I'll take questions on medicines later if you're interested on that. What we have done here now in response to this around the world, but I'm going to focus on America, is to induce an economic coma. That is to say, everybody go home, don't do anything, except essential people. And by the way, I hope you're all keeping in your thoughts and your prayers, and I hope you're grateful to all of the people who continue to work as essential people, because those are the grocery store clerks, the truck drivers who bring the food to from the distribution centers, the farmers, of course the police, of course the firemen, and our military all over the world. There's a whole lot of people who are out there working for you even while we are isolated, which is what we should be doing just now. But I'm going to tell you what I think the timeline is on that in a minute. So how did the U.S. Congress respond to that? Well, with the leadership of the administration, you take a look at this, you've got the world's economy has been put to sleep, literally to sleep. And now we've got to wake it back up again. This has never been done in history, ever. There is no precedent for this. So we looked at what does it take to keep employees employed and employers so they can keep their business and bridge through this thing. And that is, it's going to take a lot of money. Some of it's going to be in the form of loans, most of it, we hope. Some of it's going to be in the form of forgiven loans, and some are going to be outright grants. I suspect that most of the people on this phone fall into the Small Business Association, that is the under 500 employees corporations. And that was the richest side of the CARES bill. We actually did this in 3 phases, but the first 2 phases probably don't interest most of you. They have to do with funding up NIH and CDC and things like that. By the way, I want to put a plug in here for the rapid response team. Last year, back before anybody ever heard anything about the Wuhan virus, we put $110 million in the rapid response fund, just sitting there for CDC to respond to epidemics. They have never been more prepared in their lives, or in the entire existence of the CDC. They've never been more prepared for it.
Yes. Can I hear you?
I need everybody to please mute, please.
So that was some good news. We were ready when the news came to us. I don't need to tell you that President Trump does not have a cordial relationship with the media. So everything he does is reported as wrong. He was reported wrong when he closed Europe before everybody else closed Europe. Now we're doing serotypes on all of the patients in New York City, and it came from Europe. So it's the coronavirus. It started in China, it went through Europe, and it came to New York. And of course, it's the New York serologies that are coming down to Miami, which is why Governor DeSantis put some roadblocks on 95 and 75, or I-10. So, I think we've had a big experience in closing down the economy. Let's take a look at some of the curves. If you don't mind, I'm going to play with my computer behind me. So it turns out that we have peaked nationally in new cases, and we probably peaked back around the 3rd of April. And it's been up and down, sort of flat, and then it's been sharply dropping off since about the 10th or 11th of April in terms of new cases nationally, and by the way, in Florida. So that's good news for all of us. It means this thing is going away, and we thought it might. We've studied the ultrastructural properties of the virus. We know what other coronaviruses look like, and we know that they tend to behave like seasonal flus. And this one does too. So that, by the way, means it probably will come back in the fall. Will we be ready for it? Yes, I think we will, for a number of reasons. The next, one of the things that we fell down on here, let's be honest, is testing. The polymerase chain reaction test is the one that is the most accurate, most sensitive, most specific to this. And we were utterly dependent on China to run those tests. We have the machines, but all of the reagents and the kits that you put in the machines and run these tests come from, you guessed it, China. And Chinese nationalized those production lines to serve themselves, even though they were American companies producing in China. So there's a lesson there, memorize that lesson, right? I mean, maybe we shouldn't have allowed the Chinese to monopolize our supply chains in so many ways, not just in clinical testing. Again, come back to that later. I think there's some alternatives. We're going to start testing widely, and you heard the governor say this. We start testing widely for immunoglobulins, that is the immunity to the virus. Did you get the virus, not identify it as, I call it the CCP virus. So, the very name COVID-19 was dreamed up by the Chinese government, and then it was forced on World Health Organization against We said, we don't like that name. We think it should be SARS-CoV-2. SARS is an identifiable virus that originated in China. Most of you here are old enough to remember that. In any event, we're calling it COVID-19 at the convenience of President Xi of China. And we're dependent on them to make that diagnosis. Well, now we want to look for the immunoglobulins, see how many people had it and didn't know they had it, whether they were sick or not sick. So that'll be important information for us to know what kind of immunity exists in the community. We call herd immunity because it's often veterinarians use the term. They actually are the ones who have the most experience in epidemic diseases because they're always working with herds of cattle, flocks of chickens, turkeys, whatever. And so we use it that way. I'm prepared to answer questions about the loan program. It's very, very detailed. And I think Matt Blackwell is on the phone too. Can you identify him?
Okay, hold on.
So for those of you just joined the call, Matt Blackwell is joining me, and Matt is my legislative director. It means he's in charge of all things legislative in my office. He has a deep knowledge of the work done on this bill. Some of the wording originated in our office. A lot of it originated over in the executive office of the president. But we've been cooperating very closely with that and trying to tune it up here and there so that it fits everybody who should get benefit from it, does get benefit from it. Is Matt on the phone?
Yeah, can you hear me on the mic here?
Yes, sir. Your mic is live, Mr. Blackwell.
All right, great.
Great. So he's standing by to answer any of the more difficult questions, as am I. I will start out by saying in this small business loan program, there have been over 1 billion loans approved, over 1 billion individual loans. The total dollars we put in the program to start was $349 billion. As of yesterday morning, when I was speaking with Secretary Mnuchin, 243 billion had been already approved, and over 120 billion was out the door. So the banks had actually cashed that many loans. The Fed has promised to forgive all of those loans that were used to pay employees' salaries under $99,000 a year, or utilities, rent, or interest on mortgage. Any of those expenses for 8 weeks will be forgiven utterly. I mean, the government simply will not go back after the banks for the money. The banks will go after the people that were loaned the money. And if you're a banker, the government's going to buy back the unforgiven part of the loan within 90 days. So this is a really, really good way to get a lot of money out the door very quickly. Nobody has ever done this before. This dwarfs the TARP thing that we did back in 2008. I mean, it's not only is it larger, it's also much, much, much quicker. And it gets the money to the people who need it. The people who are employed and the small business owners. And that was our first concern, the small businesses. We're going to help the large businesses, but we're going to give them loans rather than these forgiven loans. So I can answer questions, or Matt can answer questions about the larger loans as you're curious. But I mean, I think this PPP program is outstanding. There's another program for smaller business called EIDL, Economic Injury and Disaster Loans. That's a little more nuanced. Those are non-forgivable loans. We also opened this up so that it would apply to the widest number of people possible. 501c3s can use it. That's never happened before. LLCs can use it. That's never happened before. Independent contractors like Uber drivers can use it. That's never happened before. So we're doing some pretty great things. There are some parts of the bill that Mr. Blackwell and I would not enjoy, would not like, don't like. We think that they got the unemployment part wrong. That was part of the negotiation with the Speaker Pelosi, and that's an ongoing discussion. I think maybe the right thing to do at this point is to open it up for questions, and I'll let you try to manage the queue if you would like.
Irvin, All mics are on, so you can start monitoring.
Be polite. Don't step on each other.
Okay. Again, Congressman Dunn, thank you very much for being on with us. You mentioned that there is that you had the COVID-19 and you was able to overcome it. What type of medication were you on?
So I would tell everybody that what they need to do is talk to their doctor. That's what I did. I followed my doctor's advice. And so my doctor advised that I take the hydroxychloroquine, which I think you've all heard about. It's an old-timey drug. It was around when I was in medical school. It was used back in those days as an anti-malarial drug. And it turns out that in combination with zinc, it has significant activity against the CCP virus, and so that was one thing. They give azithromycin on top of that. That really probably doesn't have anything to do with the virus. It's just because most people who die of pneumonia die of a bacterial superinfection laid on top of it. So you get a viral pneumonia, and then the bacteria comes in on top of that, and it's usually the bacteria that kills you. This is a little bit different. Okay, so this virus actually tends to have, it has 60% of the people who die from pneumonia die of pure viral pneumonia. 40% have a superimposed bacterial infection. So take both of those. I think there's a new medicine. I think it was brand new. It was just published Monday, a week ago Monday. It's not a new medicine. It's an old medicine repurposed. It's one we've heard of. All of your veterinarians know this medicine. It's called ivermectin, and it's probably more effective against coronavirus than hydroxychloroquine.
Really? Huh. Thank you, sir.
I have
Other questions?
I have a quick question about the payroll protection plan. My wife went through the computer thing, and there were a couple of places that we were supposed to upload that didn't pertain to us. So she skipped over those, and hence we got no verification number. Is it still going to go through?
So it's a tough question to answer one on, one off, but I'll tell you what, did you go to your bank or did you go to the SBA?
It was through the bank.
Okay.
Online through the bank.
So if your bank approved the loan, then I think you're set. The banks this is a really novel idea. Instead of making every loan be approved through the SBA, we gave blanket authority to every single FDIC insured lender in the country to automatically be an SBA approval authority. So if the bank approves it, you're approved.
Thank you.
So the thing would be go to the bank and talk to them then, is that what you're saying?
Right, exactly.
Thank you very much.
Ask a tough question. Let's put Matt on the spot.
Other questions?
Well, if you don't have any questions, let me say a couple of more closing comments. First off, we're working on this program, all these programs still. We understand that there's pain in the economy that we haven't addressed yet. We know there's people who haven't been fixed yet. I think it's a shame that we've inveigled so many people to be unemployed by giving that extra $600 a week. That was a bad idea because our intention was to keep everybody in their jobs, the government pay their salaries for 8 weeks, and by then we think we have the doors back open. And we will start phasing the doors back open probably next week. All right. I mean, and I know people are going to howl and moan, and the media goes crazy when I say that. But I tell you what, we're on the down slope, and there's large areas of this country that have no coronavirus. And by the way, we're blessed to be in one of those areas that has very, very few. I'm one of the few, and I only have another 4 or 5 days in quarantine, and I'm clear. But we're ready to open the economy in North Florida. But we're ready to open the economy in most of Alabama, most of Georgia except Atlanta, you know, and the Midwest. My God, if you go up through Kansas, Nebraska, you know, Dakotas, Montana, they're okay. They're ready to open the economy, and the fact that they're locked into their houses doesn't make sense. We need to turn the world's economy on. A bad economy kills people just as much as the virus does. Total viral death in America now is running right at 26,000. I know you used to hear 2.2 million. That was crazy. And by the media is pandering to panic. I probably do a half a dozen interviews a day on radio and TV, and I have to tell you, if I'm not talking panic, they don't really want to talk to me. They want to hear panic. They want to hear hysteria. They want to hear gloom and doom. And when you crunch the numbers on this thing, it's awful to have 26,000 people dead. So far this winter, the seasonal flu has killed at least 39,000 Americans, maybe as many as 60,000 Americans. Seasonal flu, not COVID-19. All right, so you know, I mean, try to put it in perspective here. We have shut down. We've shut down half of the world's economy, at least. One half of the world's economy. Never been done before. Now we got to stand it back up. And that's a project. That's a real project. And I'm there. Matt's working on it. I don't let him sleep at night. And he doesn't let me sleep much either. But you're in the best place in the world. America is the best place in the world to be right now. You don't want to be anyplace else. This is where we're going to find the cures. This is where we're going to do the tests. This is where we're going to get the economy right. And I yield back.
Congressman, yes, sir. We do have a couple of questions that came in. One question is, I understand Sweden has taken a different approach to managing pandemic. How is that working for them?
So the Swedish approach is actually pretty ruthless. I mean, they're saying, go out, do what you want. You know, the people who are fragile, old, have lung disease, you stay home if you want to, come out if you want to. Your chances of dying are much higher than the young people, but we're willing to accept a certain number of deaths, a percentage of deaths, just to impart herd immunity. So the thought is that when you get the virus, that, like me, you're going to be immune to the virus thereafter. And we haven't tested that, right? We don't know how long we have tested it. We know that it imparts immunity for some period of time. Is that period of time 6 months, 6 years, or the rest of your life? We don't know. We don't know. But there's some immunity associated with it. But in order to get that immunity level throughout their population, they're willing to write off a bunch of people. And that's not usually the way we approach it in America. Just saying.
There's another question that says, I took my daughter learner's permit to Liberty County Tag Office because they were open. When will Bay County and surrounding counties follow suit with preventative measures for the employees as Liberty County did?
So, great question for Bob Micah, you know, or your county commissioners. I have 19 counties that I'm personally responsible for in the whole country. So I'll be honest with you, I haven't figured that out. I will put a plug in though for the tax collector's office here that runs the DMV and all that. You know, Chuck Perdue has been doing that, and man, the efficiency of that office has been so dramatically improved. I mean, you know how you used to say, yo, you don't want to be like the DMV? Well, now everybody wants to be like the DMV because they really work. They hum over there right now. So when they're open. So I'm just sure when they can open, you'll find Chuck Perdue will open that thing as fast as he can.
Yes, sir. And one last question. There's been a request for you to repeat the flu numbers. Can you repeat those numbers?
Yeah, and vanished off my back screen there. But I mean, so we have in the country about 26,000 people dead from COVID-19. I don't have the Florida number. I think it's 461, 467, something like that. So that's dead. But, you know, we're following the wrong number because if you get cumulative deaths, they always go up. That doesn't tell you anything about what's going to happen tomorrow. What you need to look at is the number of new cases day by day. And those are sharply down. And in fact, the deaths per day are down. They're down nationally, they're down in Florida, they're down in New York. So, and we're not running out of ventilators. We were never running out of ventilators. That was another one of the media hysteria things. We have 20 times as many ventilators per capita as Italy. 20 times as many ventilators per capita as Italy. And a whole lot more people who know how to use the darn things. And by the way, if ventilators turn out not to be the secret super sauce anyways, it's simply saturated oxygen or even hyperbaric oxygen. So, I mean, we have, you know, the focus on ventilators was always, it was a red herring.
My fellow Rotarians, please join me in thanking Congressman NEAL DUNN for being on with us today. And sir, we appreciate all of the information and we appreciate all that you do for our country and for Northwest Florida.
Thank you. I'm going to give you a phone number for my Panama City office, and then my constituent services chief is going to be grateful for this. She is wonderful. I love my staff. They solve problems. They stun me with the problems they solve. And the phone number over on 11th Street in the office is obviously 850-785-0812, 0812-785-0812. And you know, they're amazing people. They're tireless. They'll work for you. And I actually, most of those problems they solve, I never even touch. So I'm grateful to them too.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And with that, I will now ask David to introduce Lori Allen.
I will. Today's topic is Gulf Coast Children's Advocacy Center. It's important that we know it is their responses to the needs in our community related to child abuse and sexual violence. It's a community group that works very, very hard at that. Our speaker today is the executive director. Please help me welcome Lori Allen.
Hi there, good morning. I want to first thank you all so much for one, kind of thinking outside of the box to continue to meet. It's really a time where we can find an excuse to take a break and focus on things at home or focus on ourselves, and the fact that all of you are still getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock in the morning to come together to find how to help others is very inspiring. So thank you for continuing to do that, and thank you for having me on to talk a little bit about what we're doing at the CAC. I'm actually here at the office. I've been working ever since we, came into social distancing and quarantine. We thankfully had a lot of protocols already written to help us in circumstances like this. And unfortunately, child abuse and sexual violence continues to happen, and we are responding 24/7. And we do have personal protection equipment for all of our team. We have been so blessed to be able to have a sufficient amount, and then continuing to see community partners donate. We actually had a group of ladies that made masks for children and delivered those just this week. So we are super grateful to be able to continue to help those that are in need. I wanted to share a video that kind of gives an overview of what a Children's Advocacy Center is, just in case many of you have not been able to tour the CAC here locally. I do invite you. We actually have one of the greatest facilities in the country, and we've been told that repeatedly whenever we have site reviewers that come from the National Children's Alliance. They just, really are so proud of the work that we're doing here in Panama City and the surrounding areas. So I'm going to share my screen here and go to this video. And let's see here. Want this to work? And I want to also give you a little bit of information about what we look like here locally. This is our 2019 annual report, and it's available on our website. So I'm going to go over this briefly and kind of hit the high points on what we're doing in terms of types of services and number of individuals that we're providing that assistance to. If you really want to dig down into things like our major donors and our board of directors and a letter from me, I encourage you to go to our website and you'll find it there on the landing page, more information, detailed information in our annual report. So a lot of people find it really hard to believe how many people are impacted by child abuse and sexual violence that they would need the assistance that we have in our area. And in 2019, we served over 20,000 individuals through our programs. Now, a lot of those individuals were children that received outreach education. And we started that program in 2017 with just one staff member. We do have 5 of them now, and their job is to go to schools and after-school programs to educate children about abuse, neglect, bullying, cyber exploitation, sexual abuse, and human trafficking. And since we began that program, over 350 children have come forward after those presentations to identify themselves as victims. And so we've been able to facilitate those cases getting reported and those children getting help. And we were one of the first programs in the country to have a case that went from a classroom setting where a presentation was given, a child disclosed sexual abuse. She was 6 years old at Deer Point Elementary. And it went all the way to prosecution, and the defendant was found guilty and sentenced to over 20 years in prison. So that story has actually been on CBS, and they just reached out to us again, a national media outlet, to run that story to talk about how important prevention and outreach education is. Right now that we are brainstorming like crazy to try to find ways to reach children at home. We know that there are a lot of children who are suffering in silence right now with the increased risk of the economic downturn, with families having increased stress in their homes, with not having an outlet, unemployment, kids not being at school, there's no visibility. We know that there are children who are in bad situations, and we really are praying that we can come up with a good strategy to continue to do that outreach education until children can become visible again. Our child protection team, they are the frontliners that look at cases that really have to do with egregious physical abuse or sexual abuse. And I know I've got about 5 minutes left. I want to leave time for questions, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. They are the first responders that work with law enforcement and the Department of Children and Families. You can see that they provided over 1,500 assessments related to child abuse, 800 specialized interviews, nearly 500 medical exams. The number of trauma therapy units that we provide in this community at no cost is just incredible to me. And I want people to understand that a lot of the folks that we connect with, especially the adults we connect with at the jail And a lot of them are females that are survivors of childhood sexual abuse or incest or sexual assault. And they are in jail mostly for substance misuse. And so when we connect with them, we are giving them the ability to find ways to cope with the trauma they've experienced that doesn't involve self-harm, and that gives them the ability to heal and grow and recover in healthy ways. And so when you see that there are 6,000 individual therapy sessions provided, think about the number of individuals that have struggled for so long trying to find a way to numb the pain inside of them, and now they're finding a healthy way, and that doesn't involve drugs, and that doesn't involve neglecting their own children, and that doesn't involve incarceration. And so we are super proud of the work that the trauma therapy team is doing in our community, along with all the others. In addition, we have lots of different in-home intervention programs. All of our programs have adapted to this Zoom technology. And so we're still connecting with all of our clients. We're still providing therapy. And then for medical exam and forensic interviews, we're still coming into the office using that personal protective equipment to keep our team and then our clients safe that come in for those assessments. A lot of people don't realize, but in 2015, we also became the area's certified rape crisis center. So we're only one of three centers in the state that is a children's advocacy center and a rape crisis center. And we expedited a grant that we received from the Bay Health Foundation to build a standalone rape crisis exam room. And that has since opened since the COVID crisis has emerged, so that individuals can go directly to that standalone center for an exam, and they do not have to go to the emergency room. And that has been really helpful to reduce risk and to also reduce the stigma of individuals who are afraid to get sick right now and they're not reporting. They can report to our hotline and we can facilitate an exam without them having to go to the ER. There are lots of different programs that are outlined in our annual report. We are doing some really innovative work here in the last couple of years. We have wraparound teams that are working in the schools, and they're taking children who have high truancy, high disciplinary rates, low academic achievement, and providing them with wraparound services to support them. We know that education is the key to break the cycle for abuse, neglect, and poverty. And these kids all have had a victimization history in their past, and they have two of those three criteria: the high truancy, the disciplinary action, or the low academic achievement. And the turnaround that we've seen for students in that program has been incredible. Our justice coordinators, they do victim service coordination with law enforcement in the field. So they do ride-alongs with law enforcement. When they go out on a scene, they're identifying individuals that could benefit from victim services, and they're doing those referrals on site right there on the scene with law enforcement. And they're also providing an incredible amount of education to law enforcement while they're there in the field. And that work opened up the need that we found for law enforcement to have free trauma therapy. A lot of them, as we were doing these ride-alongs, gave self-disclosures about the impact that the work has had on them, nightmares, sleepless nights, that they themselves may have been a victim of sexual abuse or child abuse, and they were struggling with some of those feelings and emotions. And so that's why we wrote the grant to the St. Joe Foundation to fund free trauma therapy for law enforcement. And so we've been able to get some funding to do that, and we've had a number of law enforcement officers who are benefiting from that service as well. And we're providing, again, that confidentially to law enforcement and free of charge. There's more breakdowns on what we're doing in terms of types of abuse, and my time is just about up. We do have some new animal interventions, so that's Voyager there. He's actually allowed to participate in court proceedings, and he provides so many wonderful services to those that we serve. For those that are, been our donors and contributors with business and individual donations, this is just an idea of what an average cost is for some of the things that we, usually have to help those that are in need. We actually just had an administrative call yesterday, really coming up and brainstorming, saying, you know, for the next 12 to 18 months, we know we're going to see a decline in event revenue, in individual and business contributions. What do we need to do to make sure that we continue to operate and not have to cut back on the things that people need? So we're already brainstorming, preparing for an economic downturn, and just making sure that those that we serve aren't impacted. We have an annual revenue of around $6 million. Our expenses in 2009, of course, exceeded our revenue due to Hurricane Michael. We had over $1 million in repairs that were needed. We are located in all 6 counties. These are all of our office locations. How you can give is also you know, listed there on our annual report, and then this is our annual photo. So I will leave the rest of the time, if it is brief, I try to stay right there around 7:45, to answer any questions that you all may have.
Good morning, Lori.
Good morning.
And thank you for that wonderful. Good morning. How are you? Miss seeing you.
I know, I miss seeing you too.
We do have a couple of questions. Are there numerous cases of child abuse or neglect with foster children? And have you seen a rise in that? And if you can kind of timeline that pre-Hurricane Michael and now with COVID-19.
So those are interesting statistics, and they're not really anything that's found on the dashboard. So let me show you, let me share the screen real quick. Whenever cases come into the Florida Abuse Hotline, it doesn't, foster parents' information is protected. And so if you wanted to look at statistics on what's going on in your area, you go to the Florida Department of Children and Families website. And when you go to services and hit on child welfare, you can come here and there's this dashboard. And the dashboard will tell you, you know, what is going on in your area. And you can really look at the number of children who are, you know, having no recurrence of verified maltreatments, the number of children entering permanency, the number of abuse cases that are happening, and the number that result in children in out-of-home placement. There's also a really wonderful information guide here on this website, talks about the child fatality review and goes into some of those things. So I really encourage you, if you haven't, you know, if this is something that interests you and you haven't dug into the statistics, this is a wonderful place to start. So your question specifically is the number of children that are abused in foster care. Whenever we receive those intakes, it doesn't list if the child is in foster care or not. Whenever we do an assessment, it just lists who the caregiver is. And so it really is up to the Department of Children and Families, CPIs, to coordinate then with the case manager from Big Bend Community-Based Care to then look into that foster family and then to see if that child is in the best placement or if there's a concern there. I can tell you from my time working and doing investigations, I did that for 6 years. I've been in child welfare now for almost 14 years. It's kind of hard to believe. Time is kind of flying by, but that it was not a lot. You know, I would maybe have less than 1 or 2% of my entire caseload were kids who were in foster care or kids who were in relative or non-relative placement that were experiencing re-abuse. It doesn't not ever happen, but it certainly isn't a majority. Does that answer your question? I hope.
This, yes, it did, and that prompted a follow-up question to that. Is the CAC involved in visitation programs for children in foster care and their parents?
We do not. So the child welfare system is actually a very large village. So the CAC is kind of like, if you think about an ambulatory service, we're the first responder. So when an allegation comes to light, children come to the CAC for an assessment so that we can give a third-party expert assessment on if that child, in fact, is a victim of abuse or neglect. And we see the worst of the worst of the worst. So we see capital sex batteries, burns on children, Just this week, we had a child with a significant head injury. We see children who have siblings who have been murdered as a result of abuse or neglect. We see children that have sexually transmitted diseases. I mean, really the worst of the worst. So when you look at the cases, you say they've seen 1,500 kids. Those are 1,500 kids that met that criteria. For the circuit and for Bay County, and they see about 70% of the circuit's caseloads, there's nearly between 5,500 and 6,000 cases that come in annually. So we see about 20% of those, a little less, 15 to 20%. And the rest of them don't meet the standard of needing CAC assessments. Now, the other thing that we do is that we do a lot of work with the criminal court system, where the child welfare system is focused on a dependency court system. So we walk families and victims through court depositions, court hearings, trials. We advocate for them. We work closely with the prosecutor's office, with Larry Bassford and his team at the state attorney's office. We work very closely with them for judicial outcomes. So we're very much invested in holding people accountable and finding justice for those children who have been hurt. At the same time, we work in coordination with the Department of Children and Families and agencies like Big Bend Community-Based Care, who then work on placement and permanency for children. We provide free therapy for those kids. But, I would say less than probably 30% of the kids that we help at the CAC are involved in the dependency court system. So they're not going to have a removal. They're not going to be placed in foster care. They are children who were victimized by someone 90% of the time in no love and trust, but they have a safe adult that they can be with who's protecting them. But that child is still a victim of a crime, and they still have court proceedings that they need to participate in.
Wow, thank you. Are there any other questions for Lori? Any other questions for Lori? If not, Lori, thank you very much on behalf of all of the Rotary clubs in Bay County Area 4. We really appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
And of course, I've been to Children's Advocacy Center many times, yeah. And I can tell folks firsthand, you all do amazing work, and you are a great service for the 6 counties that you serve. So thank you very much for all you do.